Can you see that? Is my PowerPoint up?
Cannot.
Oh, you cannot. Okay. Oh, share screen. OneDrive box. Okay, to share my screen, I go down here to the share screen. Is that correct?
Yes, mine is green and says share screen.
Yep. Okay, I go up, but I don't. Oh, there it is. There we go. How's that?
There you go.
Okay. Whew. There's one step taken care of.
What the heck?
So, whoops. So, let me tell you about myself real quick. I am a United Methodist pastor, but I was working for 20 years for the state of Maryland as a game warden. My wife is also a United Methodist pastor, and she was elected bishop. And we were told that we were moving from the eastern shore of Maryland to West Virginia, where she would be over all the United Methodist churches here. I was just going to retire, and at the last minute or so, the state of Maryland came to me and said, we've got a spot in Hagerstown, Maryland, where we will pay your salary, but you'll work for the Drug Enforcement Administration. And our daughters were out of the house. Sandra was going to be running crazy trying to figure out what it means to be a bishop. So I said, well, what the heck? I'll live in Hagerstown, and Sandra can live in Charleston for a couple of years, and I'll finish out my state time and be a DEA agent. What happened was my eyes were opened to the horror of what the opioid epidemic was causing within families. As a game warden, I was dealing with commercial fishermen, and out on their boats, I knew that there was some drug use, but I never saw the families. When I started working in Hagerstown with DEA, I started seeing the children, and it just about killed me. A lot of other things were going on, so I just decided I've got to understand this better, so I started doing my own studying. Driving back and forth every weekend to Charleston to see my wife and back, it dawned on me that in every crossroads of West Virginia, all the government folks, all of the specialized people are responding to the opioid epidemic. But in every crossroads, there's a church or two or six with good folks in them who just don't know what to do or how to respond. And so I took it on as my mission to help get rid of the stigma of addiction within the churches and to help them find ways to respond that can aid in everyone's response, because we're at the point now where we all have to do something. So I put this program together basically to go into churches and get rid of the stigma, but it has turned into snowball of something else, of a very great, easy way to understand how opioids affect the brain. So, opioids are depressants. Now, that does not mean that you take an opioid and you feel bad. On the contrary, you take an opioid, you feel good. But opioids depress our respiratory rates and our heart rate. So it slows everything down. It's taking you in the wrong direction. When you overdose on an opioid, it's not a violent death. You lay down, you go to sleep, and you don't wake up. The other drugs that we hear a lot about, meth, crack, cocaine, Molly, they're stimulants. They get your heart and your pulse and your respiratory going. And as long as you don't have a stroke, you're better off than with an opioid, because you're going in the right direction. It's keeping your heart going. So opioids are depressants, and they all start with this. This is a poppy, and this particular poppy is grown traditionally in Turkey, Afghanistan, and Colombia, South America. Now, that was thousands of years ago. humans have discovered the potency of this poppy and have spread the seeds everywhere, and it now grows just about anywhere on the planet. It's not the petals that are important, it's this seed pod that's right under those beautiful red petals. Each year, twice a year in a normal field, the poppies grow, they develop this seed pod. Yeah, okay. They develop this seed pod, and inside are the seeds and this sap. The opioids that we're interested in come from the sap. So think about this, how labor intensive this is. You've got to scratch each pod, let that sap come out, and then come back and collect it. That is a lot of work, to have a field that's full of thousands of poppies and to go and scratch them and then collect this sap. We've known about the potency of opioids for thousands of years. Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, talks about taking the seeds from this seed pod, putting it in your chalice of wine, drinking that wine, and he says, your mother and your father can die in front of you, and you will shed not a tear. That's powerful stuff. Now, in our epidemic, we've been talking a lot about physical pain, bad knees, bad backs, for why people start using them. That's emotional pain that is being covered up. And humans have known about this for thousands of years. That sap that comes out of that seed pod is opium. And opium is most often tied to China. But poppy did not grow in China. It grew in Afghanistan, Turkey, and Colombia, South America. What happened was the British Trading Company in the 1800s was looking for new trade routes. They went to China, could not work out deals with what they had to trade, discovered opium, went back to China and made a trade. And evidently the Chinese folks are highly genetically susceptible to addiction with opioids, and it just about destroyed China. It was so bad that 2 wars, the Opium Wars, were fought to try to get the British out of China so they would stop spreading opium throughout the country. At the end of the war, the British, I guess, sort of won. And that's how the British ended up with Hong Kong as a port to run opium into China for trade purposes. Opium has been used as medicine. It does relieve pain. It does relieve coughing. It does relieve diarrhea. But it does not cure anything. It covers up pain. It covers up symptoms. And the potency is unknown. A physician back in the day could prescribe one person a little bit of the sap of opium and then prescribe another person that same amount, but it affect them totally different, just because the potency was unknown. It wasn't because it could be when the sap was collected, it could have been a rainstorm right before that and weakened it, or it could have been a drought time and made it a little bit stronger. Well, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, a pharmacist, Friedrich Schüttner in Germany, decided he was hearing physicians complain about not controlling the potency. And so he became interested in taking opium and figuring out just what was it in opium that caused pain to stop, that did the pain stopping. He did all types of experiments, ran all types of chemicals, and he finally developed these tiny, tiny crystals. And in those crystals were morphine. And morphine is what is in opium that causes pain to be stopped. We had now a way to control the potency, because I could give one person 2 crystals and another person 2 crystals, and they were getting the same amount of morphine. It still didn't cure anything. And evidently, if you took morphine crystals orally, it would upset your stomach. So a doctor would always have to figure out, are you so sick that it'd be better for you to be throwing up than whatever other symptoms we're covering. But in 1842, just before our Civil War, Dr. Wood in England invented the hypodermic needle, to where we could inject liquids right into our veins. We could now liquefy those morphine crystals and inject them right into our veins and get almost instant pain relief. This was a godsend to the Civil War soldiers who were out in those field hospitals having their legs sawed off, their arms sawed off, terrible wounds. They could almost instantly get pain relief. Trouble was, after the Civil War, we had tons and tons of Civil War veterans who were addicted to morphine. Morphine was not regulated. It was available. Traveling salesmen could have it. You could get it anywhere. And it sure made everybody happy and very calm, but the addiction rate was very, very high. This is a box top that came with a vial in it, and it was Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup for children teething. It was morphine and alcohol. And you can imagine how quiet a teething baby could become if you rub a little bit of this liquid on their gums and cause the baby to go right to sleep. Morphine was used all over the place. Used like Kool-Aid. It was just all the time. It was known that there were addiction issues, but it was not known how to deal with that. The opioid was used by physicians for a whole host of reasons, and it's all to cover up pain or to stop a cough or to deal with diarrhea. Some of these words I don't even know what they are, and I don't want to know what they are, but it was used for everything. Now remember, at this time in the 1900s, if you went to your physician, you were very likely to be offered a cure that was to be bled, to get the bad blood out of you, or an enema of any type chemical. And those were your two choices of high medical help. So to be given some morphine and be able to sleep through a night was a godsend. The Bayer company, Bayer Chemical Company in Germany, knew about morphine and its addiction rates. They decided to go into their laboratory and try to take morphine and make it a better painkiller, but less addictive. Unfortunately, they came up with heroin, and they put it on the market for 2 years as a painkiller and a cough suppressant, but soon realized that it was so addictive it was not good for anybody. This is an advertisement, and they had just invented aspirin at the same time. So they were pushing in the United States aspirin and heroin was used for a cough suppressant. But again, it only stayed on the market for a year or two before they pulled it off and realized that it was not good for anybody. But unfortunately, the recipe got out and we've been dealing with it ever since. Codeine comes from the sap of the poppy plant, used for cough suppressant. It is not nearly as addictive as heroin or morphine, but it comes from the family. And the reason that's important is, let's say at Thanksgiving, I come to your house and we're gathering as a family. I've got a terrible cough. I'm a recovering addict, but I'm keeping everybody awake with my terrible cough. So I go to the corner doctor. I don't tell him anything about my previous addiction. He doesn't ask me anything about my previous addictions, and prescribes me cough syrup with codeine in it. If I don't recognize codeine as a opioid, I can take it and very likely relapse and go back to my opioid addiction, all because of trying to get rid of a cough if I don't recognize it. It's very scary stuff. The synthetics, the things that we're now making by hand, everything before was right from the poppy plant. We went into the laboratories and started making our own man-made, human-made opioids. The reason this happened was a perfect storm. Back in the 1980s, there was Dr. Kevorkian. Dr. Kevorkian came out and said, I have patients who are dying of miserable death of cancer, and my peers in the medical community will not take pain seriously. We're just ignoring it. So I, Dr. Kevorkian, will create a cocktail. And when you have a loved one who is dying a miserable death of cancer, call me. I'll bring the cocktail over, and when that person is ready to take it, they can take the cocktail and die with dignity, death with dignity. The medical community's, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't kill people, we help people. And a pendulum began to swing that went from we're not dealing with pain to where pain is the all-important subject in a doctor's visit. Dr. Kevorkian pushed us to talk about pain. Insurance companies, at about the same time, health insurance companies said to physicians and hospitals, we're going to send out evaluations to your patients. If we get bad evaluations back from your patients, we're not going to pay you. Part of the questions in those evaluations was, did your physician take your pain seriously? Did your physician treat your pain? Now, all of a sudden, physicians are well aware of pain because of Dr. Kevorkian, and well aware of pain because their wallets were being affected. At the same time, there were pain clinics throughout the United States. If you had a terrible, terrible back pain or some sort of chronic pain that you just not get rid of, you could get into these clinics and you would have a team of physicians and specialists assigned to you to help you learn either to overcome the pain or to learn to live with the pain. You would be given a psychologist, a physician, an occupational therapist, orthopedics, whatever. All these folks would work with a single patient to help them learn to live with this chronic pain. Health insurance companies were not thrilled at all that 4 or 5 physicians were dealing with one patient. All of a sudden, we had in our laboratories these synthetic opioids that we hear so much about today. A doctor in any town can take chronic pain and cover it up with a prescription of one of these and many, many, many more opioids. The insurance companies were happy. The doctors were taking pain seriously. And we were covering up pain, and everybody seemed to be happy until finally we realized that the addiction was much worse than any pain we were covering up. These are 2, fentanyl and carfentanil, that we hear about all the time. These are very, 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 very strong opioids. Fentanyl has been around for years and years in the surgical labs of hospitals. If you went in for surgery, there is a very good chance you would be given fentanyl as a painkiller so you would not feel the pain of a surgeon cutting you open. What you have, though, is a single physician, an anesthesiologist, who is giving you that fentanyl and monitoring your heart rate and your respiratory rate. If you start to overdose, if your heart rate goes too low, your breathing rate goes too low, they would give you a shot of Narcan, the very stuff we're trying to get out in all the communities. And it would bring you back enough to where they can keep you sedated and get through the surgery. But we have known about fentanyl and Narcan in hospitals for years and years and years. Somehow, fentanyl got out, and it has been terrorizing us ever since. Carfentanil is a large animal sedative. It's used in zoos. It puts to sleep rhinoceroses and elephants and hippos. It got out and is being added to heroin or meth to up its potency. Now, let me explain why in the world somebody would want to add something so horrible to something that's already so horrible. Let's say there is a fella down in South America, in Colombia, who has a poppy field and he makes a single kilo, a brick of heroin, 100% pure heroin. He gets that up to Mexico, sells it to a dealer there. He makes his profit and goes home. The dealer in Mexico has got to get this brick of heroin across the border and keep it inexpensive enough to where people will want to buy it, and yet potent enough that they will want to buy it. He takes it before he ships it and chops it up, makes a big pile of heroin, and then he adds anything to it that he wants to that's about the same color. Heroin can come from dark brown to pure white. A heroin dealer will look at what color is there and then add something to it. It can be baby powder, it could be meat tenderizer, benefiber, anything that has a little bit of a brown color to it can be added, mixed up, and then all of a sudden you have doubled your product. So now the dealer in Mexico has 2 bricks of heroin. And we'll say roughly that they have cut the potency in half. One brick is half as much, the other brick is half as much of potency. Those bricks get across the border into the United States and sold. And then every dealer that touches it until it ends up in our hometown cuts it. They take it, open it up, chop it up, add anything to it. It's amazing what folks have been injecting into their body. But it's harmless in the sense of potency. It's making the heroin less potent. Folks who are addicted and using talk to each other. Well, they don't talk to each other, they text each other. And they will go to a dealer, buy their heroin, inject it, and realize that it is so weak they're not feeling anything. And they will text each other. Don't go to Freddie. Freddie doesn't have anything that's worth anything. Another dealer will hear that and take his heroin and add just a bit of fentanyl or carfentanil to it to bring the potency up. Repackage it, not scientifically, no measurements, just kind of add to it, mix it up as best they can, and get it out onto the street. And if you get word that people are overdosing, that's good news, because that tells the addicted brain that's the stuff we want. That's what we want to get into our system as soon as possible. So the fentanyl and carfentanil are added to the heroin to bring up the potency. And that's what happened when in Huntington a few summers ago. Some very, 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 very strong heroin ended up in being dealt. Word got out that people were overdosing, and the addicted mind says that's what we want, and they all charge to go get some. And we'll talk about that later, why that is. How bad things are. In 1956 through well, we're still recovering bodies in Vietnam, but in 2006, we had recovered 58,220 bodies of servicemen and women who were killed in the Vietnam War. Now, those are deaths that were caused by gunshot, car crashes, drownings, illness, any way you could die in a war were part of that 58,220. In 2017, we had in the United States more than 72,000 deaths just to overdoses. Not car wrecks caused by somebody driving while high, not gunshots by dealers killing each other, not HIV, not family violence, not neglect, just the overdoses. We are losing a Vietnam War in our nation every year. Now think about that. Think about that Vietnam Memorial in Washington. We could recreate that every year just by the overdose deaths. West Virginia lost 733 men and women during the Vietnam War. In 2017, we lost 909 West Virginians to overdoses. The good news is that just recently, we've gotten the word that the overdose deaths have dropped to 702 in 2018. So we're coming down. And I'm sure part of that is because of all the Narcan that we're getting out and it's being used, which is a very, very good thing. So the deaths are coming down, but I don't know anything about the use. And I'm afraid that, especially with this coronavirus and this separation everyone's experiencing, I'm afraid that use might be going back up. But at least our deaths are going down. Bishop Ives was a bishop in West Virginia years and years ago, and he made this quote, but he cannot remember what he was talking about when he made it. But I took it from him, and I use it in my church talks about how we all need to respond. He said, "We may not be the best qualified to do this, but we are the ones who are here and who have the responsibility of doing it. We can't wait until the best qualified ones come along. Right now, in this place, at this time, we are the best qualified ones to do it." Our culture tells us that if you don't have a PhD in auto mechanics, you really ought not be dealing with or working on your car. If you don't have a PhD in child care, don't babysit. We are become so specialized, so highly trained, so compartmentalized that we're afraid to step out and try something new. We're at a point with this epidemic that if we don't respond, we're doomed. We are not going to get out of it. So every single person in West Virginia, every single person sitting in a church pew has got to find their ministry and get out and get involved with it. That is the end of the PowerPoint part. And now we're going to go old school and do a flip chart on Zoom, something nobody else has ever done in the history of Zoom. Look at this, look at this, look at this. Let me get this up just a touch more. Can you see that okay? I'm getting text. Okay, very good. So, the brain. This is an exact and to scale replica of the base of our brain. I am told that it's about the size of your fist. Let me turn this light off. It's the sunshine coming through a window. It's about the size of your fist, and it sits at the top of our spinal column. It is a small part of the brain that is very powerful and made up of a lot of little parts that have huge words, and I can't begin to pronounce them or remember them. So it's called altogether the limbic system. The limbic system does not operate on reason, does not operate on common sense. It operates on memory and what it believes we need to survive. It keeps us alive without us having to think about it. It's a good thing. It handles my heart rate, my respiratory rate, my balance. It handles my temperature, my hunger, all the things that if I had to stand here and talk to you and think about, I'd fall right over on my face. It does all of this without me even being aware of it. On top of this is what makes us human, and that's this gigantic part of our brain that does work on reason and common sense. It's where language is, it's where art appreciation is, it's where morals are, all the things that make us human. Psychologists call this part of the brain the reptile brain because just about every creature has this much brain because you got to stay alive. This part is what makes us human. And this big part works on rational thought. The limbic system does not work on rational thought or common sense, but works on memory and what it believes we need to survive. So, for example, I go to my doctor, and my doctor says, Barry, you are intelligent, you're handsome, but you're fat. You have got to lose some weight. And to do that, we're going to put you on a diet. Well, I don't know anything about calories, obviously, but let's say every day I eat 2,000 calories, and my doctor puts me on a diet of 1,000 calories. My rational brain says, heck yeah, let's lose weight. We'll be healthier, we'll feel better, and how hard is it to cut back? I just got to remember to cut back, no big deal. So I go home and I measure out my leafy green vegetables, my sugar-free Cheerios, and my legumes, whatever a legume is. And I have a legume and a Cheerio and a piece of spinach for dinner. I go to bed, and as I fade off to sleep, my rational brain is going, good job, Barry Ball. We are losing weight, feeling good. Tomorrow's going to be a great day. Probably have to buy new blue jeans just because you're so going to be so small. Wake up the next day and I realize that I have a meeting Handle with Care with Andrea Dar. And Andrea has gone out, and in the back of the room where we're meeting, she has laid out a table. And in the middle of that table is a pile of donuts. And when I walk into the meeting, I'm hungry. You know what I mean? I'm hungry. And my rational brain says, stay away from the back of the room. You don't even want to look at those donuts. But my limbic system says, oh, Lordy, you have never in your life seen such a display. We need to go over, just to be polite, and take a look at those donuts. And of course, I walk back there. Nobody stops me. Nobody says, hey, Barry, I hear you're on a diet. Nobody stops me. I walk back there, and the limbic system says, let's pick one up and have a bite. I pick a donut up. I take a bite. And as I bite it, I realize that Andrea has, well, let's just say, been real cheap. She's gone to the 4-day-old bread store and bought what was on sale there for these donuts. There's more glaze on the floor than in my mouth. It's nasty. It's stale. It's old. And my rational brain is saying, oh, spit that thing out. That's foul. We don't need that. We don't like it. My limbic system, though, is saying, I've never had a donut so good in my life. Woo-wee, let's have another one. And I pick up another one and eat it. My hunger is less now, but my rational brain is saying, you idiot, you dummy. How? Not even 24 hours on a diet and you have blown it already. I sit down in the meeting and I can't even concentrate on what's going on. All I'm hearing is that voice from my rational brain saying, you're a loser. You're a chump. How in the world can you not stick to a diet? But then there's this other little voice that pops up and says, I know what would make us feel better. There's one more donut over there. Let's go eat it. And I get up and I go eat that donut. And you know this voice. It's a still, quiet voice that kind of just taps you on your shoulder and says, we need this. It's not that we want it. We need it. I go home. I'm miserable. I'm just eating myself up. I have one legume for for dinner, I go to bed, and I wake up the next day and I have a raging headache. This diet's going to be the end of me. I don't have anything out of the ordinary, and about 1 o'clock in the afternoon or so, my limbic system says, Barry, you're killing us. We need 2,000 calories to live, and you've cut us back to 1,000, and we're going to die. Die, we are. We're just going to waste away to nothing. So I'm taking over, and my limbic system takes my metabolism and drops it off dramatically. I can't lose weight unless somebody cuts my leg off. Have you ever dieted? You lose weight real quick, and then you plateau? It's not your fault. It's your limbic system that takes over and thinks you're going to die if you don't go back to your old ways of eating. Weight Watchers said, if we can get people through this plateau with support and conversation, and then the body will kick in and we can lose weight some more. We can lose more weight later. It's getting it through that plateau, not giving up. That's what addicts have to do when they're trying recovery, is get through that plateau over a long period of time with support and help and conversation, and then they can begin to live a normal life, still aware of their old addiction, but through the hard part. Another example. I can ask you to hold your breath. So you take a deep breath and hold it. And then I say, hold that breath until you pass out. You can't do it. At some point, and it's different for every person, the limbic system says, now is the time we must breathe. It could be 15 seconds, 20 seconds, a minute maybe for somebody. But at some point, the limbic system is going to say, gasp. And you gasp, and you breathe, and you stay alive. A good thing. Amen? That's great until you dive into a rock quarry and go a little too far deep, and you start swimming towards the surface. And just before you get to the surface, and you can see the surface with your rational mind, you can see the surface, and you know if another 2 or 3 seconds, I will be up and able to breathe. But that's too late for the limbic system. The limbic system does not work on rational thought and reason. It doesn't care that we're underwater. It says, now's the time to gasp. And we gasp and we drown. That's a powerful part of the brain. That's a powerful part of the brain. And that's where addiction comes from. Not reason, not common sense, but memories of what it thinks we need to survive. Not to feel good, not to be happy, but to survive. This large part of the brain where reason and common sense takes place is where we often try to deal with people who are suffering from addiction. We have a rational conversation with them. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your health. Stop using the drugs. And their rational brain is still working, and they're saying, I know that. I know that. But they are controlled by their limbic system. And they frustrate us, and we frustrate them because this part of the brain doesn't care what we're talking about. It's going to use because it believes we need to use, have to use to survive. And everybody gets frustrated. The more we frustrate the person suffering from addiction, the more they use, because that just covers up more pain and more pain. It's just a terrible cycle. But if we understand that it comes from here in the limbic system, we can work in different ways to help them try to come to their own conclusion that changes have to be made and support is available. So that's the large part of the brain. Now we're going to talk about the very tiny part of the brain of the neurons and nerve cells. So we have nerves that run in chains from our little toe to our brain, all over our body, thousands and thousands and thousands of these chains. And each chain of nerves does one job specific. They don't multitask. So one chain will handle pain, one chain will handle pleasure, one chain will handle hunger, respiratory, temperature, all different things that have to take place in a body to stay alive. Each chain of nerves does one job. The crazy thing about us is that these nerve cells don't touch each other. Between each cell is a gap. And somehow information has to travel from one cell to the next cell to the next cell to the next cell to the brain, so the brain can respond either to pain, to pleasure, to hunger, to temperature, to breathing, whatever it is. The way this happens is through electricity. The first cell gets the message and it realizes, it makes a judgment somehow as to how strong a response the body needs to make. Let's say I get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and stub my toe unexpectedly. I think it's the end of the world, but my body realizes, maybe it's just 3 neurotransmitters that jump across these chemicals that fit these receptors on the next cell. That amount of electricity is converted into these 3 chemicals, neurotransmitters, that jump across to these receptors. And then that same amount of electricity goes to the other end of the next cell. The same thing happens over and over and over. And within a split second, I feel the pain. I jump up on one foot and bounce around and create a brand new cuss word at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm very creative at 1 o'clock in the morning. When that pain is gone, has passed through here, these neurotransmitters, these little chemicals, are reabsorbed back, or if they're old, they get flushed out and get eaten up by little enzymes that are outside this gap. Opioids affect multiple parts of the brain and multiple chains of nerves. This nerve chain with an opioid blocks these neurotransmitters from jumping across, and the pain is stopped. It's just deleted, ended. It's done until those opioids wear off and the pain might come back. Opioids also affect our pleasure center of our brain, which is also in the limbic system. In the pleasure system, in that chain, the chemical that is here that jumps across this neurotransmitter is dopamine. We've all heard of dopamine. So something pleasurable happens, and 3, 4, 5 dopamine neurotransmitters come across, land on these receptors, and cause that message to go right to the brain, and we feel good. So, example. I come home tomorrow night, and my garage door goes up, and I realize that my wife has not come home yet. So, 2 dopamines jump across. I'm starting to build. And I go in the kitchen and realize there's something in the freezer that I put there a couple of days ago. And another dopamine jumps across. I open the freezer door, the light comes on, the cool air comes out, and there sitting in the freezer is a Breyer's chocolate ice cream with the plastic still on it. Woo! Can't wait. Pull it out, take the plastic off, throw it to the side. I don't get a bowl, I just get a spoon. I open it up, I take a big bite, and it is so good. By that time, maybe 400 of these dopamines have jumped across. It is feeling so good, it tastes so good, and all of a sudden I hear my wife's garage door go up. So I build, I plateau, hear the garage door, and drop off. That's the way pleasure is supposed to work in the body. It rises, it falls, it rises, it falls, it rises, it falls. Some days there ain't much rising. Some days there are a lot of rising, but it's not meant to last for long periods of time. This is where we get into trouble with the opioids. When I take an opioid, it gets broken down into molecules that are not dopamine, but somehow, some way, these fit these receptors perfectly in the pleasure centers. And all of a sudden, very quickly, when I take an opioid, I go up. There's not much building. I just go right up. Woo! And then I stay. And as these wear off and float away, there's other ones there to replace them. And all of a sudden, I am flying high for a long period of time. Guess which part of the brain learns very quickly? That's what we like. That feeling there is what we need to feel in order to survive and live in this world of so much pain. If a person has mental illness, depression, anything, and they just don't feel right, a couple of times of feeling this good for this long, and their limbic system says, that's what we need. And that is addiction. The belief that we will not survive if we don't get that good feeling from this. When these start wearing off, we take some more to go back up, but it lasts so long that the limbic system learns very quickly that this is what we need. Meth and cocaine don't last nearly as long. They're quicker high and quicker down, and they have to go up and down, up and down. Opioids tend to last a lot longer on this plane. Unfortunately, those first couple of highs that a person gets are not repeatable, and you're always chasing that high, wanting to get that super good feeling that we got the first couple times we used it. That is why when fentanyl gets into town and people are overdosing, the addicted brain, the limbic system says, oh, that's the stuff we want. That's what we need to feel so good again. And people will step over bodies to get to the super strong heroin. Narcan. Narcan is a drug that we give to counteract an opioid overdose. It does nothing for a methadone overdose. It does nothing for a cocaine overdose. It only is effective on opioids. What happens is a person is overdosing. They get too much of this in their system, and their breathing and their heart rate begin to shut down. A dose of Narcan is given, and it comes in and it blocks these receptors. It covers them up so that these opioids that are still floating around in this gap cannot reattach. So all of a sudden, a person comes up from their high into detoxing. They go from feeling nothing to feeling horrible. To detox from an opioid is supposed to be extremely painful. Like the flu 7 times over, just body aches. You've been constipated from using the opioids. All of a sudden, you're not constipated anymore. You've got diarrhea. You're throwing up, sweating, miserable. Ambulance crews roll in, give a hit of Narcan, and a person comes up and does not say, "Ooh, thank you for saving my life." They say, "You bleepity bleep bleep bleep, what did you do to my high?" And they come up fighting very often because they've gone from pleasure to pain in no time. So these receptors are blocked. The trouble is, Narcan does not last in the body as long as opioids do. So if a person does not go to the hospital for observation, if they are over, 21, 18, 21, and sign a release and don't go to the hospital and go into their house by themselves and sit down, when that Narcan wears off, they can very rightly overdose again if there's still too much of the opioid in their body. Or if they go back into the house by themselves, when they start feeling bad, their limbic system will say, I know what will make us feel better. Let's use again. They use again, but the Narcan is still there blocking it until the Narcan wears off, and then they overdose again. This is why we hear so many times of ambulances having to go to the same house over and over and over again, because there's no way to judge how much is in the body. It is so, so important that a person go to the hospital for observation, or at least they are with somebody who will keep them from using again and can keep an eye on them in case they overdose when the Narcan wears off. So very important. That, I believe, is my presentation. I will look to see, or are there any questions? I'll be happy to try to answer some. Hillary, do we have anything?
I don't see any.
I've got a phone call from Savannah, Georgia. I bet it's my car warranty's gone bad.
Oh, let's see. Oh, someone wants to remind us how we could administer Narcan.
Oh,
There are trainings that are available. Usually the health department will do those, or your local substance abuse prevention coalition can help guide you depending on where you're located. Barry, do you have a...
and it used to be that you had to go sit down in a class, sign in, and do. It's gotten to the point now where if you'll just go and listen to a pharmacist tell you how to use it, you can get. You may have to pay for it at the pharmacy. There are other places where you can take the training and get a free Narcan set, and it can either be the injectable type that goes into the thigh, or it can be the type that nasal spray that that you squirt into the person's nose.
I know here in Putnam County, we just had, does it Save a Life Day maybe on September 2nd? And I know in Putnam they gave out 1,000 doses into trainings for quite a few people. So they are available all over the state, just different times. Or I know, especially in Kanawha County, the health department does a lot of trainings there.
Before COVID shut us down, I was doing on Tuesdays. On Tuesdays, I would go to the harm reduction program in Cabell County at the health department as a chaplain, and to hear people's stories. They would come in and want clean needles, but they would also want to re-up their supply of Narcan because they'd used 2 or 3 rounds during the week for friends. And to me, that is just mind-boggling. And to them, it's just like, that's what happened. Can I have some more? But it is saving lives. It is absolutely saving lives. And as long as a person is alive, there's an opportunity at them finding recovery.
And there's someone commenting about the health department. They did a training. You had to sign a form to say we got it, why we needed it for their records. Really, I think the last couple of months, even those kind of the trainings and things have really even loosened up because of the pandemic. So I think they were even doing drive-through trainings. If you listen for about 15 minutes, and you could get the Narcan.
The other big thing that West Virginia needs to be very proud of is the creation of family treatment courts. I think that's what they're called. Boy, that is huge. Instead of just a drug court where the parents go over here and a juvenile drug court where the kids go over there and nothing ever happens in between, these new court systems are working as a family with support, with mentors to help keep families together, to try to bring recovery and not destroy families. I think it's a huge, huge step forward. A great way to keep the jails empty and to find families ways of living together in a healthy way.
That is great. Yes. So it's National Recovery Month. So thank you for sharing this with us in September. that worked out well for us as well.
Even though you canceled me in August, but that's okay. We'll just say that was the reason.
Sorry, yeah, it was totally planned this way.
I go from church to Rotary Club to anywhere and do this presentation, and then we'll expand it and collapse it any size. But if anybody's interested in me coming somewhere, I'll be happy to consider that and see where I can go. I absolutely love doing it and think it's vital for West Virginia and the country to get.
And I am so appreciative of you and your flip chart. That's one of the things that I love most about this presentation is it's easy for anyone to understand the information, even though you have your fancy doctorate degree.
That's right.
You don't speak to us in your fancy doctor language.
Well, when you called me and said we got to do it by Zoom, I went into complete panic mode of how do I do a flip chart, and so I just had to experiment to figure out how to do this.
That's fantastic.
Let me put my plug in for Handle with Care while
we love Handle with Care.
When I was still with the Drug Enforcement Administration in Hagerstown, we had a family of a mother, a daughter, and a son who had a gentleman in their house who died of an overdose. And our job as DEA was to go out, try to figure out to get the cell phone of the person that was dead, to figure out who had sold him the bad heroin so we could track that down and get that off the streets. While we had the man's cell phone, and he was in a bathtub upstairs dead, the mother, the daughter, the son were all standing there, and as we stood there with the cell phone, the drug dealer thought for sure the woman would have the cell phone, and he texted her and said, if you give this to the police, we'll kill you.
Oh my goodness.
So we went into panic mode, took the mother, the daughter, the son to a motel, put them up for the night, and the plan was that in the morning I would pick up the mother, the daughter, the son, take them to school, bring the mother back to our office, and we would debrief her there in the morning. Next morning I go to the hotel at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and out they come. They jump in the car. The mother and the son get in the back, and the little daughter, I call her Chatty Cathy, she gets in the front seat, and we have a conversation. We only had about 20-minute drive to school, but we talked about the world. And I asked her, what did you do last night when you got to the hotel room? Oh, she says, oh my goodness, I've never seen a bathtub so clean before. And I had seen the bathtub that she'd lived around and with a dead man in it. It was not clean. And she said, I just had to have a hot bath. It was so clean. I just wanted to have a hot bath. So I had a hot bath. Mom went out and got us some food. So I'm figuring by the time I dropped them off at the hotel, she probably got to bed about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I picked her up somewhere between 6:30 and 7.
Wow.
She talked about how exciting it was to be in the hotel. But she'd also been in the house when the man died. She'd been in the house when the drug dealer called and said, we'll kill your mom if she gives the phone to the police. I drive up to the elementary school. I get out. I get Chatty Cathy out of her door. I get this brother out of his door, and I look at them both, and I said, be good and have a good day. And I let them walk into the school. Be good and have a good day. How in the world could I have not thought to walk into the school with them, walk them into the principal's office and say, this is what Chatty Cathy has been through? It never crossed my mind.
Aww.
That very week, I found Handle with Care on the internet. And within a week or two, I was in Andrea's office saying, here I am. What can I do? How can we work together? And it's been a match made in heaven ever since. But that is so important that these children have some sort of protective coat put on them when they go back into their elementary schools or their high schools, when they've been through such horrible, traumatic things in the evening.
Yes, and we have, most of the time, no idea what these children have gone through.
Yes.
And, in their days, in their nights before. And if the days that I do get down to sit down and talk to some of them, my heart breaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Similar stories and things
And they
of
have survived somehow. That's what's amazing. I mean, they are so strong.
mm-hmm.
I would have never made it. I don't think I could have made it.
Yes, trauma-informed care. Someone just commented.
Yep.
So important. So important. Um, Barry, someone wants your contact info
Oh,
for a presentation.
let's see. What do you have? How would I do that? Oh, I
You
can
can
put it in
type
the
it
chat.
into the chat if you want.
Okay. Okay.
Comment about logical to keep Narcan in the car, but the training that they had warned about a possible breakdown due to the heat. That is
Yes.
really true. So we have to be careful how you store it. Yes, you'll get a certificate of attendance.
And look at there. Look at there. It's in the chat section.
Yay. Okay, steinerbowl@gmail.com. And if for some reason anyone loses that, you can contact us at Mission West Virginia, and I'll be happy to put you in touch as well. Q&A. Someone asked if you have any insight on how children are affected by adults addicted to opioids.
Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. Yeah. Just
Some of that you just shared.
the first time it hit me in the gut, we did a raid on a house in Hagerstown, just a regular row house. We went in about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. We kicked the door in, go in. It's a 3-story house. Please, 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 everybody down, 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 and we charged in. And the first thing I remember is stepping in the house and hearing crunch. And I later looked down, and it was just dirty needles that were all over the floors. And on each floor of the house, there was adults that were passed out from heroin use. But meeting us at the front door that I ran right by because I'm such a good person, I ran right by her, was this little girl, probably in the 2nd or 3rd grade, standing in amongst those needles in socked feet, holding a pair of roller skates, saying, "Would somebody teach me to skate?" Here she was in a house where she hadn't been fed dinner. Nobody was helping with homework. The adults were passed out, and she just wanted an adult to play with her and teach her how to roller skate. And I thought that was going to be the end of Barry Ball. I just could not figure how do I respond to that. And that was a big driver in me saying that we've got to support these children. We've got to be mentors for them in the schools. We've got to care for them because nobody else is reading to them at night. Nobody's helping them learn to read. Nobody's doing math homework. Nobody's doing spelling homework. And if I could get people from local churches to volunteer to be their mentors for years on end through their elementary, junior high years, it would be a life changer for everybody. But the effect on these children is just huge. It's psychological. It's the ACEs. It's their limbic system being on high alert at all times, ready to fire off at a moment's notice because of some threat that it senses. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. The other big thing, I like this silence. I can just keep talking forever. The other big thing that needs to be worked out in our culture is how do we develop trust of the person in recovery, and how do we get them back into a meaningful workforce? There are so many laws and so many rules of, if you've got this felony, if you've got this addiction problem in your past, you cannot work here. So how do we help people get past that and get into meaningful employment? There are some, I've learned of smaller programs here and there, But that's giant. That's giant if we're going to keep as a state good people who've been ill and have realized they're ill and have worked through recovery. How do we get them back into a meaningful employment? Um, it's giant, and a lot of it has to do with building trust again.
Question about how the churches have been responding to helping with the children. I know that's been a
We
big
were
deal.
rolling there for a little while until March. Uh,
Right.
what I do is go into the church and talk about help them. I really push them becoming mentors in the schools because it's so easy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to transport the kids. You don't have to feed the kids. You go to where they are, and that is church. You just love them, help them read, help them learn to do math, and you are doing ministry. Um, but also, I realize that in churches, as in anywhere, there are folks who would scare a child. There are curmudgeons that sit in the back of the church pews and mumble and moan and groan, and we wouldn't want them caring for children. But everybody has a place in this, and if we can help every person find their, and maybe their ministry is, oh, I don't know, giving car rides to the recovery house down the street for folks to get to the jobs, or painting, or because some folks just don't have personal skills. Can I say that out loud? Amen. Hallelujah. Uh, so, but everybody, I believe, my faith tells me everybody has a gift they can offer in this, and we just need to have the courage to step out and use it.
Someone asked if there's an average age for an addict, or does it just cross all age and socioeconomic classes?
What I have seen in my reading is that this, no, this frontal lobe, this big part of the brain, well, you can't see it now. There we go. This part of the brain up here is an on-off switch. It's where executive decisions are made. Now think of a 14-year-old boy. They are not making executive decisions. Amen. They are looking at the girl down the street, or they are looking for ways to get out of their homework. They are not thinking ahead of, boy, I'd like to be a brain surgeon, so I probably need to do this math homework now, and then I can go out and play later, or whatever. The younger you, this does not fully develop, this part of the brain does not fully develop until a person is about 25 years old. Anybody that's raised a teenager, I know, are saying amen right now. With that, the sooner a person starts using any type of drug, alcohol, whatever, that part of the brain gets pushed back in its development, and especially evidently with marijuana. It pushes the executive decisions off till 30 or 35. That's scary, because if you're not making executive decisions, then you're liable to go, well, marijuana's not bad, let's try cocaine. And if cocaine's not bad, let's try heroin. Or let's try sex and unprotected sex. And then, all these things that adults are using their executive decisions making for, these children don't have. And the sooner they start doing these things, the worse it is for them into the future, because that part of the brain doesn't develop until much later. So I honestly cannot tell you if there, and this epidemic has been so strange because part of it was doctors prescribing these pills. So someone who could have been genetically predisposed, or somebody who just found that it made them feel better, um, it was coming from all over. It wasn't going down to the street corner to buy illegal drugs. It was going to your physician and getting these drugs. Um, so I would say it goes across all age levels, but the most dangerous for long term is the younger they start, the worse it's going to be in the future.
Um, let's see. I've noticed that some states or areas give out Narcan as needed with little to no difficulty of obtaining it. Why in West Virginia do we have to obtain training and then we only get one box?
Couldn't tell you. I know it's expensive, and I know that folks that give it out have to do that through getting it through a grants. I'm not sure. Well, the training is just good. I mean, it's simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's one time and you're good. Um, but why grants aren't available? I guess, or some folks can get it easier. Um, Others, you just got to work a little bit at it. And what is scary to me, being a former police officer, I carried all types of stuff in my truck, but with the heat or the cold, most of the things that I carried that were supposed to be used in a moment didn't work because I had left them in the truck. So bringing it in and out, just having it around the home is very good. Having it in the churches, in the community centers, we have boxes with AEDs in them. We have fire extinguishers. There's no reason why we can't have some Narcan in with the AED or somewhere around the fire extinguisher also.
Um, any other questions? Did I miss anybody?
You can get Narcan if you just call your health department. I'm sure they can point you in a direction, and it may just be going to your local fire department. Also, they may be able to help you out also. And then, what areas do we see the most problems? And you mean what, geographically or psychologically or? I couldn't tell you at this point. Ever since uh, COVID, I don't think anybody really knows what's going on out there.
Okay, no, and there's no sign-in sheet for those who are asking and for those who have asked about the certificate of for CEUs. What's going to happen is your participation today was the sign-in sheet. So I will have a report of everyone who was logged in today. That is what we will use to turn in for your CEUs. So if for some reason you're under someone else's email address or something like that, please let me know. You can send me an email and I'll put my
Mindy, if you email me, Mindy, with that question, I can give you a link of where this has been videotaped before. Not this session, but a real live church session where I could move around for sure. But if you, Mindy, if you'll email me with that question, I'll send you that link. And everybody, when Zoom comes out and says if you pay an extra $100, we'll teach you how to use a flip chart on Zoom, you tell them I don't need that because Barry Ball did it first time ever in the history of Zoom. Hillary, you got muted.
Okay.
There you are.
I see lots of thank yous. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, was I muted for my whole spiel on how to get a certificate?
Through the email, right?
Everyone will be emailed a certificate probably by next week.
Let me go to Ann's question about methadone. I did leave that out. Methadone and Suboxone are two opioids that, for some reason, do not cause as high a high as oxycodone or heroin, and they're used to keep a person from getting into withdrawal, keeps them from getting dope sick, which is the flu 7 times over, where everything is just miserable that you to get the drugs out of your system. So if a person is afraid to go into withdrawal, they can use methadone or Suboxone, which will not get them high, but will keep them level through the day. So supposedly on paper, they will be able to be parents, they will be able to be employees, participants in society. You are addicted to methadone and you are addicted to Suboxone, and they are evidently very, very painful to get out of. I've talked to just a few folks who have tried or who've done it and said it was more miserable than getting off of heroin. I don't understand that. I don't, but if it keeps a person alive, they're alive. And the thought was years and years and years ago, when heroin use was a urban problem, was that we can use methadone to get these people back stabilized, but we don't want these clinics that give out methadone out in our neck of the woods. So they kept them downtown in bad parts of town usually, and you have to go early in the morning to get in line and stand outside to get your dose and then go to work. So it has a lot of stigma attached to it, and I've done surveillance in Hagerstown on the methadone clinic downtown, and drug dealers sit around it and talk to folks as they're coming out, trying to get them to use again. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's horrible. Suboxone came along. It's just a little bit different drug, and the thought was, let's let regular family physicians prescribe this. So you can go to your regular family physician, get on Suboxone, and not have the stigma of having to go to the methadone clinic. But you are addicted to both of them. And some people immediately start weaning themselves off and do fine. Others never wean themselves off. But if you're alive, and there's always hope. There's a lot of misuse, but if it keeps some alive, it's worth it. It's worth it to me.
I agree. You're ruining my perception though of Hagerstown and that area. I used to live in Martinsburg, and my husband and I would get tickled because the newspaper out of Hagerstown, the front page paper would be something like 2 ducks found dead in local pond. And we were just like, oh, slow news day. And I just love that. Living there and now you're telling me all the bad
Yeah.
things.
We have, right down the street from the methadone clinic, I've discovered a dentist who, if you would come in and have a tooth pulled, he'd give you 30 days worth of what was it? It wasn't Oxy, but it was one of the synthetics. We had, in that, once I realized it, did surveillance and started watching people, we had people with no teeth, addicts, just looking for any way to get back into the dentist's office so they have some sort of procedure done. It's just horrible, just hard. And his deal was greed. He didn't care anything about the people. He just wanted their money.
Right. Unfortunately. Are there any other questions? Let's seeing anything. What is the website for Handle with Care? Do you have that information right offhand, Barry?
If they send me an email, I'll send it right to them.
Okay. There are some great presentations going on right now, weekly webinars for Handle with Care. And I wish I had that at my fingertips to hand out, but they do have some great stuff going on right now, so definitely check that out if you have the chance. All right, well, I guess I'm gonna close this up, Barry.
All right. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you for pushing me into this. Now I can do it anytime for anybody.
I appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I will have information out soon on our next webinar. Have a good day.